Chapter 2, Evocation and Calamity. Lydia Turner hummed to herself as she turned onto the right lane on Cherry Grove Avenue and made her way towards home. She had just finished running her errands for the day and couldn't wait to get home and do some gardening, her favorite pastime, and relax on her hammock and catch up on some reading after she was done. She knew that Ella and Tuck were visiting the PAW patrol for the day, so she decided that she'd take some time to fully re-energize herself by taking a nap in and inhale the fresh, warm spring air. On the way, she picked up some of the twins' favorite pup treats. Bacon-flavored chews for Tuck, and liver sausages for Ella. It was a strong way of showing her love for both of them. They were all that she had. She would be nothing if she hadn't found them as strays when they were just baby pups. She could remember the whole event as if it just happened yesterday. Flashback. About 3 years ago, Lydia was a lonely woman, having lost her husband Tim to a fatal stroke. Lydia was devastated at the loss of Tim, and fell into a deep depression for days. However, one day, she decided that she would take a walk. She thought that instead of using her car, she could stretch her legs and try to relieve some of her grief. It was raining, but she didn't care. She had a coat, boots, and umbrella. When she made it into the city limits of Adventure Bay, she was walking on the sidewalk when all of a sudden, she heard the sound of whimpering coming from a distance in front of her. The whimpering made her stop in her tracks and listened closely. The whining was coming from an alleyway a few feet away from her to the right. Listening more intently, she could hear another whimper coming from the same area. They sounded sad and scared, almost as if they were crying out for help. Curious, she walked up and turned to the alleyway, and what she saw made her gasp, making her heart sink. There was a puppy, a golden retriever, lying under a cardboard box, shivering from the cold rain. Lydia could see tears rolling down its cheeks as it whined and shivered. Seeing this almost made her cry herself. What was this poor little thing doing out in the middle of an all by itself, she wondered. And most importantly, where was its parents? Careful not to scare the puppy, Lydia gently walked up to it. Noticing a presence, the puppy looked up at her. Frightened, it backed away from her and started to growl. Oh, Lydia said, surprised at the pup's sudden change of attitude. She then took another few steps toward the pup and kneeled down to its level. You don't have to be afraid of me. I'm not going to hurt you, Lydia spoke softly to the pup, trying to ease its fear. I'd never hurt even a fly. The puppy stopped growling and stared at Lydia, however it kept a small glare on its face as it was still skeptical about this stranger. Lydia motioned the puppy with her finger and clicked her tongue to try to get it to come to her. Don't be scared, Lydia repeated. I'm the nicest person that can be. Still a bit hesitant, the pup took a few steps toward the human before finally mustering the courage to walk over until she was a few inches from the woman. Lydia looked down at the little retriever. Well, aren't you a cutie? You have the most beautiful blue eyes I've ever seen. And your little pink nose. I've never seen a dog with a pink nose. She took her pointer finger and booped the pup on its nose, causing it to twitch and sniff. You'll also like 12K481. Lydia laughed and reached out for the dog to pick it up. Surprisingly, the puppy allowed the woman to pick her up and hold her. She then began to cuddle the little dog. After a while, the little pup began to smile as she snuggled in the woman's warm embrace. It was first time in a while that she had cracked a smile. Even though she didn't know her, she felt thankful to be held in someone's warm arms. Hey! The heartwarming moment was suddenly interrupted by an angry bark. The two turned their heads toward the direction of the voice. To Lydia's surprise, she saw another golden retriever puppy, this one a male, running towards them, an expression of disdain on his face. What are you doing with my sister? The puppy stopped when he was a few inches from the woman. He glared up at her. Who are you? What do you think you're doing? The puppy looked just like the other Lydia was holding. However, instead of a pink nose, his was dark brown. But he did have the same blue eyes like the other one. Oh my, Lydia said, stunned. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Did the pup just speak? Actual words? You can talk? The retriever's glare darkened. Yeah, I can. So what? That's not important right now. What's important is wondering what you are doing with my sister. Whoa, Tuck, it's okay. She's friendly. Lydia turned to the female pup in surprise. She could talk, too? Maybe she was so overwhelmed with grief from her husband's passing, she was hearing things, she thought. Yeah, that had to be the reason. Animals couldn't talk. It was all just in her head. But that assumption quickly died when the pup in her arms turned to her side and spoke. I'm really sorry about my brother. He's a bit overprotective. Well, my word, Lydia started, I've come across some unbelievable things in my life. But I never expected to meet a talking dog, let alone two of them. I thought I was losing my marbles. She placed the pup down on the ground beside her brother. The male pup surveyed his sister for any signs of abuse. Are you okay, Ella? Did she hurt you? Tuck, I'm fine, the pup named Ella replied back, annoyed, slightly pushing her brother back. I told you she was friendly. Just making sure, sis, Tuck responded. He turned his head toward the woman and scowled. Who are you? What do you want? Tucker. Ella snapped at him. Don't be rude. She turned to the human. I'm sorry about him. He can be a bit of a pain sometimes. Oh, no, that's all right, Lydia replied understandingly. I've met people and animals far worse. I'm Lydia, she introduced herself. And I caught that your name is Ella? Ella nodded. Yes, that's right. She pointed her paw to her brother. And this grump here is Tucker, she said, earning a glare from the male retriever, but he prefers to be called Tuck. Lydia smiled. Well, it's a pleasure to meet you too, she said. Her expression turned into curiosity. I hope that I'm not being too rude to ask, but why does he not want to be called by his full name? Well. Ella hesitated for a moment. Our father's name was Tucker, which means that Tuck's real name is Tucker Jr., but he doesn't really like being called that, he thinks it's silly. Ella turned to Tuck. Sometimes I like to tease him about it, she said, giggling, making Tuck roll his eyes. It's not funny, he grumbled. Lydia chuckled, too, but then her expression turned solemn. Another question, Ella, she said. Ella looked at the woman. Yeah? Lydia was wondering why these two pups were all alone in the middle of an alleyway with no adult retrievers in sight. Well, speaking of your father, she began. Where is he? In fact, where's your mother? Shouldn't they both be here to protect you two from the rain and any other kind of danger? Ella looked down at the ground and sighed sadly. Tuck's face was holding a look of sadness, as well. Lydia could tell by the looks on their faces that what was about to be said wasn't going to be a happy response. She felt her heart break when saw a tear trickle down the retriever's cheek, then sniffled before taking a deep breath before she spoke. We don't have parents anymore. Her voice cracked a bit at the last words. This made Lydia gasp in shock. What? What do you mean by that? Did they abandon you? No. Ella lifted her head up to Lydia's face. Her eyes were now brimming with tears. There. Ella let out a choked sob and began to weep silently. Tears streamed down her cheeks as her eyes shut tightly and her head facing the ground. Her shoulders bobbed up and down with each sobbing breath she let out. Sensing that she was crying, Tuck came up behind his sister and wrapped his paws around her neck and pulled her into a tight embrace. Then he looked up at Lydia. The bitterness and coldness he had towards the woman was now replaced with a look of complete sadness, tears beginning to brim his eyes, as well. Lydia's heart broke at the sight. Whatever had happened to their parents, it was clear it wasn't going to be good news. Tuck then spoke. Our parents are dead, he said. He took a paw off of Ella and wiped a tear from his eye. Lydia gasped again. Now she knew why the Ella was whimpering and crying when she found her. Tuck continued. We never actually got to meet our dad, he died when our mom was still pregnant with us. But like Ella said, I have the same name if he did. Mom gave it to me to show how much she loved him and remember him by. And Ella got her name from our grandmother, our mom's mother. Her name was Ella, too. Your mother sounds like she was a total sweetheart, Lydia told him. Tuck cracked a small smile at the comment. Yeah, she definitely was. She loved us both more than anything else. She did everything she could to keep us safe. His smile faded and turned back into sadness. Then, he choked up at what he was about to say as tears brimmed his eyes again. He wiped them with his paw again and took a deep breath before continuing. Then, a couple days ago, me and Ella were playing tag in the park. We were having so much fun, until we wandered off too far and ended up in the middle of the street. Before Ella and I knew it, Mom screamed out that there was an oncoming car heading straight for us. Me and Ella couldn't move, we were frozen in fear. It was then that Mom quickly jumped and pushed us of the car's way. We didn't even see what happened to her next, as we landed after she had pushed us. But we did hear the impact of something hitting the car. We turned around and saw our mother laying on the ground. Tuck sniffled as his eyes became misty and his voice started to crack. Ella and I ran up to her and saw that both of her front legs were broken, and there was blood coming out of her mouth. We both shook her to try and help her up. But tears were now starting to pour from the retriever's eyes as his voice became choked from crying. But she wouldn't move, and we both knew at that moment that she was gone. He shut his eyes tightly and started to weep silently, his shoulders bobbing up and down with each sob, tears streaming down his face. Seeing the puppy brought tears to Lydia's eyes herself. She couldn't imagine how traumatizing it was for both pups to lose their mother in such a tragic way. Then, Tuck gritted his teeth tightly as a growl began to form in his throat. His eyebrows furrowed as his eyes opened, revealing that his expression of sorrow has now changed to one of anger and hatred. "You know what the worst part about that was?" he asked, his lips curling into a snarl. "The driver who hit our mother didn't even bother to stop and check and see if we were all right." His paws clenched as his anger grew thinking about it. They just kept driving on like they didn't have a care in the world. His growl became louder. "When I find the person that killed our mom, I'm gonna tear them limb from limb. I'll make sure to hurt them as much as they hurt our mother. I'll send them to hell." Tuck was cut off as he felt a paw touch his shoulder. He turned and saw the tear-stained face of his twin sister Ella. Her lip was trembling and she sniffled. "Tuck, please, stop," she pleaded softly, voice cracking from sobbing. "Please calm down, sniff. Realizing he had scared his sister, Tuck's anger subsided, and his expression changed into a look of sadness and guilt. He closed his eyes and turned his face away from Ella. He inhaled and exhaled a few times to calm himself down from his tirade. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to go off like that," he apologized, looking up at Lydia. "It's just that, seeing our mother die right in front of us put a lot of trauma and pain on us." He closed his eyes again and choked out a small sob. Tears streamed down his face as he spoke. Sniff. We just miss her so much." A tear rolled down Lydia's cheek when she heard the puppies weep. Bless their little hearts, she thought. They lost the most important thing to them, their mom. "Oh, don't worry about it, honey," she said reassuringly. "I know how it feels to lose someone you love. I recently lost my husband." The two puppies gasped. I am so sorry to hear about that," Tuck said, wiping what tears he had left with his paw. "I bet he was a wonderful man." Lydia smiled sadly. "Thank you," she replied. "He really was. I miss him every day." She wiped a tear from her eye. Suddenly, an idea came to Lydia's head. Seeing these two pups living on their own in an alleyway without a mother made her very concerned for the twins' well-being. "Hey. How would you pups like to come live with me?" She gave them a smile. "I've been very lonely without my husband, and it's not safe for you two to be out on the streets alone. You both deserve a nice, loving home, where you can be taken care of and be loved. Would you like that?" Both twins' eyes widened at her offer. You really mean it?" Ella said. Lydia nodded. Really?" Tuck said. Happy tears were now forming in his eyes. "Really?" Lydia repeated. Huge smiles spread across both of the twins' faces. They both let out yips of joy as they ran towards the woman, tears of happiness streaming down their little faces. Lydia kneeled down and held out both of her arms. Both pups jumped into her arms and began licking her face furiously, making Lydia laugh from the tickling of their tongues. The depression the trio had felt began to melt away like an icicle, drip by drip. Each one of them got what they had all longed for, a happy, loving family. End of flashback. From that day on, life had been brighter. They spent each moment together. Every Christmas, Halloween, the twins' birthdays, Thanksgiving. Every single moment cherished between them. Every day, throughout the years, Lydia watched the twins grow from tiny baby pups to beautiful, young retrievers. The love they all had for each other was so strong, that if it were a brick wall, not even a wrecking ball could demolish it. She smiled at the memories. Truly, if she had never found the twins that day, she probably would have died from all the stress and grief from losing Tim. If anything bad were to happen to the pups, she didn't know what she would do. As she neared her home, Lydia noticed something that made her raise an eyebrow in confusion. There was an ATV parked in front of her house, along with a small police cruiser and an ambulance that looked like they were the size for a pup. Both vehicles' lights flashed, the police car, red and blue, and the ambulance, red and yellow. And what was that yellow line in the front yard? Was that police tape? Curious and a little concerned, Lydia slowed down and saw that Tuck and Ella's power split bikes were in the driveway. Lydia's heart dropped a bit as worrying thoughts were running amok in her head. Why were the police and ambulance there? Had something happened to the twins? Did one of them get badly hurt, or worse? Lydia stopped the car and got out, not even bothering to collect the groceries. She walked up to get a closer look at the yellow lining in front of the yard. It was indeed police tape, and on it read 5 words all capitalized. Paw line do not cross. Paw line? Lydia questioned herself in her mind. What did that mean? A realization suddenly hit her. This must be the PAW patrol, she decided. She had never met them before, only knowing about them from Ella and Tuck. But what were they doing here? She hadn't called them for help. What was going on? Lydia was just about to cross the police tape when a voice called out, "Stop." Startled, she turned her head towards the direction of the voice. She saw a German shepherd running up to her. He was wearing a blue police uniform and a black collar with a pup tag of a yellow star on it. Seeing that it was a dog, she realized she had guessed correctly. This was indeed the PAW patrol. But what were they doing at her house? The shepherd stopped when he came up to her. "Ma'am, I'm afraid you cannot cross this line." "It says so on the police tape," he said, pointing his paw at the yellow-lined blockade. His face held a stern look, but Lydia thought she could see a bit of sadness behind the dog's eyes. "But, I live here," Lydia replied, her emotions a mix of confusion and worry. "Why can't I pass?" The shepherd closed his eyes and let out a long sigh. Lydia thought she could hear trembling in his breath when he did. The dog looked up at her with a serious but saddened look before. "Ma'am," he began. Lydia stared back into the pup's eyes. Were those tears? Theirs. The shepherd's voice cracked a bit when he said that. "There's been a crime here. A very gruesome one." Lydia's eyes widened. "CC crime?" She stuttered. "What do you mean?" She silently prayed that whatever happened, Ella and Tuck weren't involved. But what the police pup said next confirmed her suspicions. "There's been 2 fatalities. One being a homicide, the other, a suicide." Lydia knew just who the dog was talking about. She didn't even have to ask who they were. Without thinking, she immediately bolted past the pup toward her front door. She ignored the shepherd's cries for her to stop. She knew that she couldn't stand around and watch. If anything bad happened to the twins, she had to know what went down, and know about it now. Despite being in her 50s, she ran as fast as her legs had ever taken her in her life. She practically burst through her door, not caring that she was out of breath. Instead of seeing the twins greeting her, she saw 2 unknown visitors turn around to face her. One was a Dalmatian pup with a red medical cap and vest, and a boy with spiky brown hair, wearing a vest with the colors red, blue, yellow, and white with a logo of a paw on the front. Another PAW patrol member, she realized. Underneath the vest, he wore a white long-sleeved shirt, despite it being summer. What are you doing in my house?" she stuttered. "Where's Tuck and Ella?" The boy and the Dalmatian glanced at each other, then their faces fell into a saddened expression. The boy then looked at Lydia and explained the situation. "Are you Mrs. Lydia Turner?" he asked her in a serious but somber tone. Lydia nodded. "Yes, I am," she replied. "Who are you?" "I'm Ryder," the boy replied. He pointed at the Dalmatian next to him. "And this is Marshall, the firefighting and EMT pup of the PAW patrol. I'm their owner and leader. I'm pretty sure that Tuck and Ella told you about us, right?" "Yes, I have," she replied, but she was surprised at how young Ryder was. The twins hadn't told her that he was just a boy. She thought he was in his mid-teens or in his 20s. But no, he looked like he was about 10 years old. She didn't care about that right now. She wanted to know what the hell was going on. "Where's Tuck and Ella?" she repeated. Ryder only closed his eyes, sighed, and shook his head sadly. Ella and Tuck, there. His voice became choked as if he were trying to keep himself from crying. I'm so sorry. They're dead. Lydia felt her heart shatter into a million pieces. Had she heard him correctly? Did Bea just say that the twins were? No. No, he couldn't have said that. He was just gaslighting her. He had to be. However, she could see on both the Dalmatian and the boys' faces that they were pulling no such joke. No. No. No, 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 she screamed, her voice shrill as tears began to brim her eyes. Please tell me you're joking? She waited for the boy to crack a smile. Tell her that this was all just a cruel prank that the twins came up with to scare her, to tell her that he was in on the act, as well. But he continued to stare at her with his crestfallen brown eyes. Lydia couldn't hold it in anymore. She dropped to knees and buried her face in her palms and started to sob loudly. This couldn't be happening. This just couldn't. First she had lost her husband, and now she had lost the two little bundles of joy that brightened up her life. Why did it have to be them? Just why? As she cried, she felt a hand touch her shoulder. She ignored it for a few seconds, then looked up with red, puffy eyes at Ryder. He also had tears running down his face. He had also lost two of his friends. I'm so sorry, he repeated, trying to keep his voice from shaking from his tears. Lydia sniffled and wrapped her arms around the boy in a tight embrace, in which he responded by doing the same. He closed his eyes tightly as tears streamed down his cheeks, letting the woman sob into his shoulder. Seconds later, Lydia let go of the boy and looked at him before speaking. W.H. Sniff, where are they? Ryder turned to Marshall, who then turned to Lydia with a look that could be described as one of contemplating whether he should do the task or not. But instead the Dalmatian sighed and said, Follow me, ma'am. The pup then walked down the hallway that led to the living room, Lydia and Ryder in tow. As she followed the dog, Lydia looked down at the wooden floor and saw drips of blood going in a straight line that led to where they were going. It made her stomach churn. Once they made it the main room, Marshall stopped and turned to look at his escorts. He then pointed his paw to a big, white, blood-stained sheet on the floor, covering two lumps that were identical to the size of a pup. Lydia stared at the sheet for a few seconds. Just the sight of the red splotches alone made a shiver run down her spine, causing her to tremble and feel like she was going to faint. This isn't happening, she told herself. This can't be happening. She wanted to pinch herself, tell herself that it was all just some horrible night terror, to wake up and see that the twins were lying at the foot of her bed, sleeping peacefully. But no matter how hard she tried, she knew that it was not the case. This was reality. Mrs. Turner, a voice said from behind her. She turned to see that it was Ryder. He sighed. I'm gonna need you to identify them. We need to know if you can confirm that it is indeed Ella and Tuck. She froze. Identify them? Why did she have to do that? Sure, she wanted to help out the PAW patrol. But a part of her was afraid of what she would see under that sheet. Another part of her wanted to see the twins one last time and say her goodbyes. This was going to be very difficult and traumatizing. However, she mustered up her courage and let out a sigh before saying, Okay. Slowly, she walked up to the sheet. Her heart was beating so fast, it felt as if it were going to shoot out of her chest. Then, she kneeled down and held out a trembling hand toward the sheet, sweat pouring down her face and mixing with her tears. She hesitated for a moment, stopping her hand from grabbing the sheet. She turned to look at Ryder, who gave a sad nod to tell her to go ahead with the task. Turning her gaze back to the sheet, she inhaled and exhaled a trembling breath. Then, grimacing slightly, her hand grabbed the sheet and she slowly started to lift it. Oh, my God! That was all Lydia could choke out once she had seen the corpse under that sheet before quickly releasing it from her grasp and covering her face in her palms and sobbed hysterically. The sheet hadn't been fully covered once she had jerked away from it. There, sticking out from the sheet, was a bloody, light blonde paw, lying like a cold rock in the night. The sight of Lydia bawling in complete anguish made Marshall turn around and shut his eyes tightly as he began to cry himself, his shoulders bobbing up and down with each silent sob he let out. Lydia's loud bawling echoed throughout the house. Her babies. Her two precious, little babies were gone. Gone forever. How did this happen? She choked out. Who would do such a terrible thing? Why? She screamed out that last word. Well, actually, Ryder told her. There's something I need to show you. He choked up. You're not gonna take this very well at all. Lydia's head rose up from her hands as she looked at Ryder. Tear stains covered both of her cheeks, her eyes red and puffy. What? Sniff. What do you mean? Ryder could only let out a shaky exhale as a response. He then looked down to the right side of his jeans and reached his hand down to his pocket. He pulled a folded-up piece of paper out of it and unfolded it. Here. He held out the paper to Lydia. You might want to read this. His lip was quivering. He sniffled as a tear slid down his cheek. Lydia stared at the paper for a few seconds, then looked up at Ryder, then looked at the paper again. With a trembling hand, she reached out and grabbed it from the boy's hand. She examined the paper. It was a note with handwriting she didn't recognize. The words were sloppily written, but she could still manage to make out the writing on the paper. She slowly read each word to herself. Dear Lydia. First off, you may be wondering how a pup can write. Well, I was writing this while holding a pen in my mouth. That's why the words are jumbled up and such. Second, if you're reading this note, me and Ella are dead. I know it's going to scar you for life when you find our bodies, but there's a reason to why this tragedy unfolded. It was because of me. You may be confused as to why I'm saying this. Let me explain. Ella and I were on a mission with the PAW Patrol as mighty pups to try and stop the ladybird. We had told you about her before. She loves shiny things, and steals whatever shiny thing her eyes land on. This time, she had stolen a very important statue from the museum. It was Mayor Goodway's great-great-great-great-grandpa Grover. We just couldn't let her get away. During the mission, Ella and I came up with different ideas to stop her, but we both started to argue over which idea was better. I know, typical sibling argument. I then came up with the idea where Ella could use her giant powers to block Ladybird's way, while I used my shrinking powers and I would use Ella to jump on the Ladybird without being seen and kick the statue right out of her grasp. However, that totally backfired. Ladybird saw me jumping off of Ella and swatted me down to the ground. This caused Ella to turn and run to save me, giving Ladybird the perfect opportunity to escape. Thank God Ella saved me, but when we saw that Ladybird had gotten away, we got really mad at each other and started yelling at each other. It got so bad that Ryder suggested we both come home to calm down and work things out, and that they would stop the Ladybird themselves. Spoiler, they did, thank goodness. We didn't say a word to each other on the drive back here. When we got back, I tried to make things up with her, but she immediately started screaming at me and blaming me for everything that happened. That got me really angry, and we were shouting at each other once again. We then began trading insults and continued blaming each other. Then she told me that she wished I was never born. It really hurt my feelings, and it made me cry. But also, I felt a rage building up inside of me. I don't know what, but it was a rage I had never felt before. Just something about the way she said that insult really got to me. I then pounced at her and pushed her and made her head hit the wall. She then got scared and begged me to stop, but I hit her in the head with my paw, over and over and over again until I ended up knocking some of her teeth out and breaking her nose. It was like totally different side of me that scared even myself. It felt like I was possessed by some demon or entity and made me attack her. I stopped hitting her and told her how I was always there for her, and how much her insult really hurt me. I then went to strike her again, but she managed to hit me the face, knocking me down and giving her a chance to escape. However, she couldn't run very fast because of the pain I had caused. All she could do was just limp. She tried calling Ryder for, but I managed to catch her and rip her pup tag from around her neck. I stomped on it a few times until it was nothing more than little pieces. She then started to cry and beg for mercy and kept saying she was sorry. But the rage had completely taken control of my body. It felt as if some evil entity had possessed me. All I did was scream at her, while she laid there and cried. I then thought of what she said that sent me into that frenzied attack, and I became even more angry. I know you're going to be shocked at this next part. I bent down and sunk my teeth into her throat and ripped out of a chunk of it. She started gurgling and choking as blood gushed out of her neck. The sight of her struggling to breathe suddenly brought me out of my rage and saw what I had done. The letter ended at that last word. Hands trembling, Lydia turned the paper around to see if there was more writing on the back. There was. I ran over to her and held her head in my arms and told she was going to be okay, and to stay with me. I even apologized profusely. I was crying really hard at that point. However, she just looked at me and said it was too late, then she gave me a sad smile and apologized for insulting me. She then told me to tell you that she loved you and the PAW patrol, and will miss you very much. She then gave me her last words, "Goodbye, bro. I love you." Then she died right there in my arms. I honestly don't know what came over me, but I knew that I just couldn't live with knowing what I had done. I killed my own sister, my own flesh and blood, and I hated myself for it. Hated myself so much that I decided to take my own life. As I am writing this, I have one of your kitchen knives sitting next to me. I'm going to slit my own throat and die a slow and painful death. I know you feel heartbroken and betrayed, and I wish I could say sorry, but what good will that do? It won't bring Ella back, and I know that you won't forgive me, anyway. But could you do a favor for me? Make sure to put Ella's favorite flowers, sunflowers, on her grave after her funeral. She would have loved that. Plus, as for me, I don't deserve a funeral. I already know where I'm going. Just cremate me and scatter my ashes in random locations in the woods so the animals can eat them. I don't care. I just don't want to be remembered as the monster I became. Well, all that being said, I just want to thank you, Lydia, for being a great owner to me and Ella. You made our lives some of the best we've ever experienced since our parents died. And I want to thank Ryder and the PAW Patrol for being great friends. We had a lot of fun adventures with the mighty pups. Goodbye, my friends. I love you all. Tuck. His paw print was stamped under his name. Lydia couldn't believe what she had just read. When she finished reading the note, her hand was clasped tightly over her mouth as she shook uncontrollably. The letter fell out of her hand and floated to the floor. She then collapsed on the ground and sobbed once more. It was then she felt a strange sensation in her chest. It started off as a small tightness, but then it grew tighter and tighter until it became an unbearable pain, a pain so bad, she put her hands over it and clutched tightly. She was breathing rapidly, unable to catch her breath. Ryder took notice of this and began to panic. Oh, my God. Marshall, she's having a heart attack. Get your defibrillators. He screamed to the Dalmatian. Marshall's tear-stained eyes widened at the severity of his owner's voice, and he immediately bolted outside to his EMT truck. Meanwhile, Ryder knelt down and put his arms around the struggling woman. She was now laying on her side, still clutching her chest, her breathing intensifying with each second that passed. Ryder was trying to calmly tell her that she was going to be okay, but his voice was trembling with panic and tears were running down his face. However, to Lydia, his voice sounded like it was miles away. It sounded like he was inside of a dark, hollow cave. She was fading in and out of consciousness with every breath she took, until she let out one long, choked breath, and went silent. No matter how hard Marshall tried to shock her heart back to beating, it was too late. Some say that she died from a broken heart from losing her family. First her husband, now her pups. Her poor heart couldn't handle the grief, and it just gave out on her. Despite Tuck being a cold-blooded killer, the PAW patrol followed his request by placing sunflowers on Ella's grave at her funeral a couple of days later. Plus, Lydia was buried beside her husband, a symbol that they were reunited not only in death, but in the afterlife, as well. As for Tuck, his body was cremated, and his ashes were scattered in different locations all around Adventure Bay. Even though he committed such an unspeakable atrocity, some people still mourned over his death, while others called him a coward for taking his life instead of taking responsibility for his crimes. Whichever way it was still a somber time for Adventure Bay. Not only did the town lose 3 residents, they lost a kind and caring woman, and 2 heroic twins that fought crime alongside the PAW patrol. And now that they were gone, it would take some time for the town to accept the fact that a gentle, sweet, fun-loving pup would become such a ruthless killer, the fact that one of the twins committed a horrible sin. The end. You've reached